The gold band caught the afternoon light as Sarah Martinez pressed it against her palm, feeling the last physical connection to her mother grow warm against her desperate fingers in the dusty Arizona Territory town of Whiskey Creek in 1882. She stood outside Doc Holloway's office, her younger brother Samuel burning with fever back in their rented room above the general store, and she knew this ring was all that stood between him and death. The door creaked open before she could knock, and a tall cowboy stepped out, nearly colliding with her on the wooden walkway. He was broad-shouldered with sun-darkened skin, wearing a dusty brown hat that shadowed eyes the color of creek water after rain. His hands shot out to steady her, strong and calloused, and for a moment Sarah forgot to breathe. "Pardon me, miss," he said, his voice carrying the slow drawl of Texas. "Didn't see you there." "It's all right," Sarah managed, stepping back and clutching the ring tighter in her fist. The cowboy tipped his hat and moved past her, his spurs jingling softly as he descended the steps. She watched him go for just a second before pushing through the door, her heart hammering with more than just worry for Samuel. Doc Holloway sat behind a cluttered desk, writing something in a ledger. He was a thin man with silver hair and spectacles that perpetually slid down his nose. He looked up as Sarah entered, and his expression shifted from neutral to sympathetic in an instant. "Miss Martinez," he said, setting down his pen, "I heard your brother took ill." "He has fever," Sarah said, her voice steadier than she felt. "Bad fever. He's been sick for 3 days now, and it's getting worse. He's talking out of his head, seeing things that are not there." Doc Holloway stood, moving toward his medical bag. "Sounds like it might be typhoid. There's been cases coming through with the railroad workers." He paused, looking at her with kind but practical eyes. "The medicine he needs, the care, it will cost $20. $20 might as well have been $200. Sarah's father had died 2 years ago in a mining accident, and her mother had succumbed to pneumonia last winter. She and Samuel had been scraping by on her wages from taking in laundry and his occasional work at the stables. They had nothing. "I don't have money," Sarah said, her throat tight, "but I have this." She opened her palm, revealing the simple gold band with its small embedded garnet. It had been her grandmother's, passed to her mother, and meant for Sarah. "It's real gold. The stone is genuine. It has to be worth something." Doc Holloway picked up the ring, examining it in the light. "It's a fine piece," he said slowly. "But Miss Martinez, this is your mother's ring. Are you certain?" "Samuel is all I have left," Sarah said, and her voice finally cracked. "The ring does not matter if he dies." The door opened again, and both of them turned. The cowboy from before stood in the doorway, his hat now in his hands. He looked at Sarah, then at the ring in the doctor's fingers, and something shifted in his expression. "Excuse me," he said. "I could not help but overhear." He stepped fully into the office, reaching into his vest pocket. "Doc, how much does the lady owe you?" $20 for the medicine and treatment," Doc Holloway said, looking confused. The cowboy pulled out a leather billfold and counted out bills onto the doctor's desk. Sarah stared, unable to process what was happening. "That's 20, the cowboy said. He turned to Sarah, his gray-green eyes serious and gentle at once. "Keep your ring, miss. No one should have to trade their mother's memory for medicine." "I cannot accept this," Sarah said immediately, even as relief and confusion warred inside her. "I do not even know you." "Name's Caleb Stone," he said, extending his hand. "And you don't have to know me to accept help. Your brother needs that medicine now, not after you've figured out how to repay me." Sarah hesitated, then placed her hand in his. His grip was warm and firm, and when he released her hand, she felt the absence of his touch like a cold wind. "Sarah Martinez," she said, "and yes, Samuel needs help, but I will repay you. I promise you that." "We can talk about that later," Caleb said. He looked at Doc Holloway. "Can you see to the boy now?" "Of course," the doctor said, already gathering supplies into his bag. "Miss Martinez, take me to him." Sarah led the way back to the cramped room above the general store, her mind spinning. Doc Holloway went immediately to Samuel's bedside, and Sarah hung back, watching as the doctor examined her brother's flushed face and listened to his chest. Samuel was 14, all gangly limbs and usually boundless energy, but now he looked small and fragile against the thin mattress. Caleb had followed them up, standing quietly near the door. Sarah glanced at him, this stranger who had just saved her brother's life, and found him watching her with an expression she could not quite read. "It's typhoid, as I suspected," Doc Holloway said. "But we caught it early enough. I will give him medicine now and leave more for the next few days. He needs water, as much as he can drink, and cool cloths on his forehead. The fever should break in a day or two if the medicine works as it should." Sarah nodded, taking the bottles the doctor handed her and listening carefully to his instructions. When Doc Holloway finally left, promising to return the next day, she turned to find Caleb still there. "Thank you," she said, the words feeling entirely inadequate. "I do not know how to properly express what you have done for us." "You don't need to express anything," Caleb said. He moved closer, looking down at Samuel. "I had a younger brother once, lost him to scarlet fever when I was about your age. No one helped us then, and I have always regretted not being able to do more." He met her eyes. "Consider this making up for that, maybe." "I am sorry," Sarah said softly, "about your brother." "It was a long time ago," Caleb said, though pain still flickered in his eyes. "You focus on your brother now. Do you have someone to help you? Family? Friends?" Sarah shook her head. "It is just us. But I can manage." Caleb frowned slightly. "You have work you need to do, I imagine. Laundry, you said?" "You were listening to quite a lot," Sarah said, managing a small smile despite everything. "Guilty," Caleb admitted, returning the smile. "Point is, you cannot watch him every moment if you need to work. I am between jobs right now. Let me help. I can sit with him while you do what you need to do." "You have already done too much," Sarah protested. "Maybe I want to do more," Caleb said simply. "Besides, I have nowhere else to be." Sarah wanted to argue, but the truth was she did have laundry waiting, and Mrs. Chen at the boarding house would not be patient much longer. Samuel needed constant watching, needed water and cool cloths, and someone to be there if the fever got worse. Pride was a luxury she could not afford right now. "All right," she said, "just for today, while I finish Mrs. Chen's laundry, but then we are even." "We are not even close to even," Caleb said. "But all right." Sarah showed him where the water bucket was, how to wring out the cloths just right, and which bottle of medicine to give Samuel and when. Caleb listened attentively, asking questions that showed he actually cared about getting it right. Finally, reluctantly, Sarah left. She hurried through the laundry, her hands moving automatically through the familiar motions of scrubbing and wringing and hanging, while her mind remained in that small room above the general store. She kept thinking about Caleb's hands steadying her, about the way he had counted out that money without hesitation, about the pain in his eyes when he mentioned his own brother. When she returned 3 hours later, arms aching and smelling of lye soap, she found Caleb sitting beside Samuel's bed, reading aloud from a dime novel he must have borrowed from somewhere. Samuel was still feverish, but seemed calmer, and Caleb's low voice filled the room with a story about a marshal and a train robbery. He looked up as she entered, marking his place with a finger. "He woke up about an hour ago," Caleb reported. "Got some water in him and another dose of medicine. Fever's still high, but he has not gotten worse." "Thank you," Sarah said, setting down her basket. "You can go now. You have done more than enough." Caleb stood, but he did not move toward the door. "Have you eaten today?" he asked instead. Sarah opened her mouth to say yes, then closed it. She had not eaten since yesterday evening, and even that had been just bread and a bit of cheese. Money for food had been tight even before Samuel got sick. "I will take that as a no," Caleb said. "Come on, the cafe down the street makes a decent stew. My treat." "I cannot keep accepting your charity," Sarah said. "It's not charity, it's dinner," Caleb said. "And you are no good to your brother if you collapse from hunger. Besides, I hate eating alone." Sarah looked at Samuel, who had fallen asleep again, his breathing raspy but steady. Mrs. Rosoulis from the room next door had emerged when Sarah came in, and the older woman now offered to sit with Samuel for an hour. Sarah knew Mrs. Rosoulis was kind and competent, but still she hesitated. "Go, Mija," Mrs. Rosoulis said gently. "You need to eat. I will watch over him." So Sarah found herself walking down the dusty main street of Whiskey Creek beside Caleb Stone as the sun began to sink toward the desert horizon. The cafe was small and dimly lit, with checkered tablecloths and the smell of cooking meat and coffee. They sat at a corner table, and Caleb ordered 2 bowls of beef stew and coffee for both of them. "Tell me about yourself," Caleb said as they waited for the food. "How did you and your brother end up in Whiskey Creek?" Sarah wrapped her hands around the warm coffee cup, grateful for something to hold. My father worked in the silver mines near Tombstone. When he died, we could not afford to stay there. We came here because it was cheaper, and I heard there was work. Samuel helps at the stables when he can, and I take in laundry. It is enough, usually. Usually meaning until something like this happens, Caleb said, understanding in his voice. Yes, Sarah admitted. What about you? Where are you from? Born in Texas, near San Antonio, Caleb said. Grew up on a cattle ranch. After my brother died, and then my mother a few years later, my father kinda gave up on everything. I left when I was 17, been working ranches and cattle drives ever since. I am 24 now, and I have seen most of the West, but never quite found a place that felt like home. Is that what you are looking for? Sarah asked. Home? Caleb considered that, his fingers tracing the rim of his coffee cup. Maybe. Or maybe I am just running from the one I lost. Hard to say. The stew arrived, thick and hot, and better than anything Sarah had eaten in months. She tried to eat slowly, to maintain some dignity, but hunger won out. Caleb did not seem to notice or care, eating his own meal and occasionally commenting on the weather or asking small questions about Whiskey Creek. Why did you help me? Sarah asked finally, setting down her spoon. Truly, you do not know me, and $20 is not a small amount of money. Caleb was quiet for a moment, his expression serious in the lamplight. Honestly, when I saw you standing there with that ring, about to trade away something that clearly meant the world to you, I saw someone who loved her brother more than anything. And I thought about my own brother, about how helpless I felt when he was dying. I could not save him, but I could help save yours. It seemed like the right thing to do, the only thing to do. Sarah felt tears prick at her eyes, and she blinked them back. You are a good man, Caleb Stone. I am just a man, Caleb said, trying to do right when I can. They finished their meal, and Caleb insisted on ordering extra stew and bread for Sarah to take back for later. Then they walked back through the cooling evening air, the desert releasing the day's heat in gentle waves. The sky was turning purple and orange, and stars were beginning to appear. I should get back to Samuel, Sarah said when they reached the general store. Of course, Caleb said. He hesitated, then added, I am staying at the boarding house on 2nd Street. If you need anything at all, come find me, or send someone to get me. I will, Sarah said. She meant to just thank him again and go inside, but instead she found herself saying, Will you come by tomorrow to check on Samuel? Caleb's face lit up with a smile that transformed his features from handsome to something that made Sarah's heart skip. I would like that very much, he said. That night, Sarah sat beside Samuel's bed, changing the cool cloths and coaxing water past his cracked lips. She thought about Caleb's hands counting out money, about his voice reading stories, about the way he had looked at her in the cafe. Doc Holloway for his promised visit, and Doc Holloway for his promised visit. And the news was good. Samuel's fever had dropped slightly, and the medicine was working. Keep doing what you are doing, the doctor said. He should turn the corner soon. Caleb arrived an hour later, carrying a basket covered with a checkered cloth. Thought you might need breakfast, he said, showing her fresh rolls, butter, and even some strawberry jam. Mrs. Patterson at the boarding house made extra. They sat together in the small room, eating rolls and watching Samuel sleep. Sarah found herself telling Caleb about her mother, about how she had always smelled like roses even when they had no money for perfume, about how she had taught Sarah to read, using an old Bible and whatever newspapers they could find. Caleb told her about his father's ranch, about learning to rope cattle before he could properly read, about the feeling of sleeping under stars during a cattle drive. Do you miss it? Sarah asked. The ranch? Sometimes, Caleb admitted. But it's not the same without my family. My father sold it a few years back after I left. Last I heard he was in New Mexico somewhere, but we have not spoken in years. That must be hard, Sarah said. We all carry our regrets, Caleb said. He looked at her, and there was something in his eyes that made her pulse quicken. But sometimes we get chances to make things right, or at least better. Helping you and Samuel, it feels like maybe I am balancing the scales a little. Over the next 3 days, Caleb came by every morning and stayed for hours, sitting with Samuel while Sarah worked, or simply keeping her company when she needed to stay. He brought food, fresh water, and once even a bouquet of wildflowers he claimed to have found growing near the creek, though Sarah suspected he had bought them from the Mexican woman who sold flowers in the plaza. Samuel's fever broke on the fourth day, and the boy woke up clear-headed for the first time since falling ill. His eyes focused on Sarah's face, and he managed a weak smile. "Sarah," he croaked, "what happened?" "You were very sick," Sarah said, tears of relief streaming down her face. "But you are going to be fine now." Samuel noticed Caleb sitting in the corner. "Who is that?" "That is Caleb," Sarah said. "He helped us when we needed it most." Caleb came over, extending his hand to Samuel. "Pleased to meet you properly," he said. "Your sister has been very worried about you." Samuel shook his hand weakly. "Thank you," he said, "for whatever you did." "Just glad you are feeling better," Caleb said. Over the next week, Samuel grew stronger each day. His appetite returned, and color came back to his cheeks. Caleb continued to visit daily, and Sarah found herself looking forward to his arrival with an intensity that both thrilled and frightened her. She caught herself thinking about him when she should have been focused on work, remembering the sound of his laugh or the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled. One evening, after Samuel had fallen asleep early, Caleb asked Sarah if she would take a walk with him. The night was cool and clear, and they strolled through the quiet streets of Whiskey Creek, eventually finding themselves by the actual creek that gave the town its name. "Samuel is doing really well," Caleb said as they stood on the bank, watching moonlight dance on the water. "Doc Holloway says he will make a full recovery." "Thanks to you," Sarah said. She turned to face him, gathering her courage. "I have been thinking about how to repay you. It will take me time, but I will save every penny I can until I have $20 to give you back." "Sarah, I told you I do not want repayment," Caleb said. "But I want to give it," Sarah insisted. "I cannot just accept such kindness without giving something back." Caleb was quiet for a moment, then said carefully, "What if there was something else you could give me, not money?" Sarah's heart began to pound. "What do you mean?" Caleb took off his hat, turning it in his hands nervously. "I have been in Whiskey Creek for over a week now, and I have not even looked for work. I keep telling myself it is because I want to make sure Samuel recovers, but the truth is, I stay because of you. I wake up every morning thinking about seeing you, and I go to sleep thinking about what you said or how you smiled. I know it has not been long, and I know you probably think I am crazy, but Sarah, I think I am falling in love with you." Sarah could barely breathe. "You are falling in love with me?" "Yes," Caleb said simply. "And if you feel even a fraction of what I feel, then maybe we could see where this goes. That would be payment enough for me, a chance to court you properly, to see if what I feel is something you might feel too." Sarah thought about the past week, about how natural it had felt to have Caleb in her space, how right his presence seemed. She thought about his kindness, his strength, his gentle way with Samuel. She thought about how her heart raced when he entered the room, and how empty everything felt when he left. "You are not crazy," she said softly. "I feel it too. I did not want to admit it, did not want to let myself hope, but Caleb, I think about you constantly. When you are not here, I am waiting for you to arrive. When you are here, I never want you to leave." Caleb's face broke into the widest smile she had ever seen on him. He took a step closer, then another, until they were nearly touching. "May I kiss you?" he asked, his voice rough with emotion. "Yes," Sarah whispered. He cupped her face in his calloused hands, gentle despite their strength, and kissed her softly at first, then deeper as she responded. Pulled apart, both breathing hard. Caleb pulled apart, both breathing hard. Caleb rested his forehead against hers. "I want to do this right," he said. "Court you properly, meet your friends, get to know Samuel better. I want to find work here, build something. I want to see if we can make this into something real and lasting." "I want that too," Sarah said. "So much." They walked back slowly, holding hands, talking about everything and nothing. When they reached the general store, Caleb kissed her again at the bottom of the stairs, sweet and promising. "I will see you tomorrow," he said. "Tomorrow?" Sarah agreed. The next few weeks passed in a blur of happiness. Caleb found work at the largest ranch outside of town, the Double Bar K, working as a horse trainer. The foreman, a gruff man named Tucker, took one look at Caleb's way with horses and hired him on the spot. The pay was good, and Caleb rented a small house on the edge of town, nothing fancy but clean and sturdy. He courted Sarah properly, as promised. They took walks every evening after she finished work, sometimes with Samuel tagging along, and sometimes just the two of them. Caleb brought her small gifts, nothing expensive but thoughtful, a ribbon for her hair, a book of poetry he thought she would like, a new tin cup to replace her chipped one. He helped Samuel practice roping in the field behind the general store, teaching the boy tricks he had learned as a child. Sarah fell more in love with him every day. She loved how patient he was with Samuel, never talking down to him, but treating him like a young man worthy of respect. She loved how Caleb listened when she talked, really listened, asking questions and remembering details she mentioned in passing. She loved his laugh, his strength, the way he made her feel both protected and equal. 2 months after they met, Caleb invited Sarah and Samuel to his house for dinner. He had spent the day cooking, or attempting to cook, and the result was slightly burned steaks, lumpy potatoes, and biscuits hard enough to be used as weapons. But he had also picked wildflowers for the table and cleaned the house until it shone. "This is terrible," Caleb admitted after they had all tried to politely eat the meal. Samuel, his health fully restored and his personality back to its usual brightness, laughed. "It really is, no offense." "None taken," Caleb said ruefully. "I can rope a steer and break a horse, but cooking defeats me." "Lucky for you, I can cook," Sarah said, smiling. "Next time, I will help." "Next time," Caleb repeated, his eyes warm on hers. "I like the sound of that." After dinner, such as it was, Samuel excused himself to explore the property, leaving Caleb and Sarah alone. They sat on the porch as the sun set, painting the desert in shades of gold and red. "Sarah," Caleb said, taking her hand, "I know it has only been 2 months, but I have never been more certain of anything in my life. I love you. I love your strength, your determination, your kindness. I love how you care for your brother, how you keep fighting even when things are hard. I love everything about you, and I want to spend the rest of my life loving you." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small box. Opening it, he revealed a simple gold ring with a small diamond. "It is not much," he said, "but it is honest work and honest money, and I bought it thinking of you wearing it. Sarah Martinez, will you marry me?" Sarah's eyes filled with tears, but she was smiling so hard her cheeks hurt. "Yes," she said. "Yes, Caleb, I will marry you." He slipped the ring onto her finger, and it fit perfectly. Then he kissed her, and Sarah felt like her heart might burst from happiness. When Samuel came back and saw the ring on her finger, he let out a whoop and hugged them both. "Does this mean Caleb will be my brother?" Samuel asked. "If you will have me," Caleb said seriously. "Are you kidding? This is the best thing ever," Samuel said. "Can you teach me more rope tricks?" They all laughed, and Sarah looked at her small family. This strange, beautiful family that had been born out of desperation and kindness and felt blessed beyond measure. They were married 6 weeks later in the small church in Whiskey Creek. Sarah wore a simple white dress that Mrs. Rosalie's and 3 other women from the boarding house had helped her make, stitching lace and buttons late into the night. Caleb wore his best clothes, his hair slicked back and his boots polished. Samuel stood beside him as best man, proud and beaming. Doc Holloway was there, and the foreman Tucker from the ranch, and Mrs. Chen, who had finally gotten her laundry, and what seemed like half the town. People who Sarah had only known as customers or passing acquaintances came to celebrate with them, brought gifts of food and cloth and tools for their new home together. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Caleb kissed Sarah like she was the most precious thing in the world. The small church erupted in applause and cheers. The celebration afterward was held at the ranch, Tucker having offered the barn and given Caleb the day off. There was music and dancing, food and laughter. Sarah danced with Caleb, with Samuel, with Doc Holloway and Tucker, and even the shy stable boy who had helped Samuel learn about horses. As the sun set and lanterns were lit, Sarah found herself standing with Caleb, watching the festivities. "Happy?" Caleb asked, his arm around her waist. "Happier than I ever thought possible," Sarah said. "Met you." "I think they know," Caleb said. "Met you." "I think they know," Caleb said softly. "I think they are watching over you, and I think they are glad you are happy." Sarah leaned into him, feeling safe and loved and home. "I kept my mother's ring," she said, "because of you. Someday I will give it to our daughter, if we have one, and I will tell her about how her father saved us, how he gave us everything without asking for anything in return." "You gave me plenty in return," Caleb said. You gave me love. You gave me a family. You gave me a reason to stay instead of always running. He turned her to face him. You gave me everything, Sarah Stone. Sarah kissed him, tasting salt from happy tears, tasting the future they would build together. They moved into Caleb's house, and Samuel came with them. Caleb added on a room for the boy, and the three of them settled into a comfortable routine. Sarah continued taking in some laundry, but less than before, and she started helping the school teacher with the younger children, discovering she had a talent for teaching. Caleb worked at the ranch, his reputation as a skilled horseman growing. Samuel thrived, growing taller and stronger, working at the stables and learning everything he could about horses from Caleb. 6 months into their marriage, Sarah realized she was pregnant. She told Caleb one evening after dinner, and he picked her up and spun her around despite her laughing protests to be careful. We are having a baby, he kept saying, wonder in his voice. We are having a baby. Samuel was equally excited, immediately declaring he would be the best uncle ever, even though Sarah reminded him he would technically be the baby's uncle already. The pregnancy was not easy. Sarah was sick for the first few months, and the Arizona heat seemed more oppressive than usual. But Caleb was attentive and caring, bringing her cool water and damp cloths, making sure she rested even when she insisted she was fine. Samuel helped around the house more, taking on chores without being asked. On a warm spring evening in 1884, Sarah went into labor. Doc Holloway came immediately, and Mrs. Rosales arrived to help. Caleb paced outside the bedroom for hours, Samuel sitting with him, both of them jumping at every sound. Finally, just as the sun was rising, a baby's cry pierced the air. Doc Holloway emerged, smiling. You have a son, he said. A healthy, strong boy. And Sarah did wonderfully. She is tired but fine. Caleb rushed into the room, finding Sarah propped up in bed, holding a tiny bundle. Her hair was damp with sweat, and her face was pale, but she had never looked more beautiful to him. Meet your son, she said softly. Caleb approached carefully, as if afraid he might break something, and looked down at the tiny red face, the miniature fingers curled into fists, the small chest rising and falling with breath. He is perfect, Caleb whispered. He is absolutely perfect. What should we name him? Sarah asked. Caleb thought for a moment, then said, What was your father's name? Miguel, Sarah said. And my brother was called James, Caleb said. What about Miguel James Stone? Miguel James Stone, Sarah repeated, testing the name. It is perfect. Samuel came in then, moving quietly, his eyes wide as he looked at his nephew. He is so small, he said in awe. You were this small once, Sarah said, smiling. Can I hold him? Samuel asked. Sarah showed him how to support the baby's head, and Samuel sat carefully in the chair beside the bed, cradling Miguel with intense concentration. Hey there, Miguel, he said softly. I am your Uncle Samuel. I am going to teach you everything I know about horses and roping and everything else. You are going to have the best life, I promise. Caleb put his arm around Sarah, and she leaned against him, both of them watching Samuel with the baby. We did good, Caleb said quietly. We did very good, Sarah agreed. The first year of Miguel's life passed in a blur of sleepless nights and small miracles. Every smile, every new sound, every tiny development was celebrated. Caleb was a devoted father, walking the floor with Miguel when he cried at night, changing diapers without complaint, spending his free time playing with his son. Samuel, now 16 and working full-time at the stables, doted on his nephew. He carved toys for Miguel, told him stories, and declared that Miguel was obviously going to be a genius because he had smiled at Samuel first. Sarah found joy in every moment, even the hard ones. Watching Caleb with their son, seeing the gentleness in those strong hands, the love in those gray-green eyes, she fell in love with him all over again every day. When Miguel was 18 months old, Sarah discovered she was pregnant again. This pregnancy was easier than the first, and on a cool December evening, she gave birth to a daughter. They named her Rose, after Sarah's mother, Maria Rose, though everyone called her Rosie. Rosie was different from Miguel from the start. Where he had been a calm baby, she was fierce and loud, demanding attention and giving affection freely. She had Caleb's eyes and Sarah's dark hair, and from the moment she could crawl, she followed Miguel everywhere. Life settled into a beautiful rhythm. Caleb was promoted to head horse trainer at the ranch. with a substantial increase in pay. Sarah stopped taking in laundry entirely and focused on her teaching and her family. Samuel fell in love with the daughter of the stable owner, a sweet girl named Lucy Chen, and they were married when Samuel turned 19. The years passed, marked by birthdays and holidays, by small triumphs and minor setbacks. Miguel grew into a thoughtful boy who loved books and horses in equal measure. Rosie was all fire and determination, climbing trees and demanding to learn everything her father could teach her about ranching. Sarah and Caleb's love deepened with each passing year, the passion of their early days maturing into something solid and unshakable. When Miguel was 6 and Rosie was 4, Sarah found herself pregnant again. This time, she gave birth to twin boys, and the house erupted into cheerful chaos. Had children of their own, first a daughter they named Sarah, and then a son. The cousins grew up together, running through the fields, learning to ride, creating elaborate games and adventures. Sunday dinners became a tradition, with the whole extended family gathering around the large table Caleb had built, passing food and stories and laughter. Through it all, Sarah never forgot where they had started. She kept her mother's ring safe, along with the small leather billfold that Caleb had used to count out $20 that desperate day. She told the children the story of how their parents met, how sometimes miracles came in the form of a kind stranger who saw someone in need and chose to help. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Caleb surprised Sarah by taking her back to the creek, where he had first told her he loved her. He had arranged for Samuel and Lucy to watch the children, and he had packed a basket with bread and cheese and wine. They sat on the bank, watching the water flow past, and Sarah thought about everything that had happened since that night. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked. "Spending that money on me? You could have used it for so many other things." Caleb pulled her close, kissing her temple. "That $20 bought me everything," he said. "It bought me you, and Samuel, and our children, and this life. It was the best investment I ever made." "I love you," Sarah said. "I will love you for the rest of my life." "And I will love you beyond that," Caleb replied. "Into whatever comes after, I will find you and love you there too." They made love under the stars that night, in the shelter of a small grove of cottonwood trees, their bodies fitting together as perfectly as they had on their wedding night. Afterward, they lay wrapped in blankets, talking about their dreams for the future, about what they wanted for their children, about growing old together. "I want to buy some land," Caleb said. "Start our own ranch, something we can pass down to the kids. Tucker has been hinting that he might sell some of the Double Bar K acreage, and I have been saving. I think we could do it, Sarah. I think we could build something really special." "Then let us do it," Sarah said. "Let us build our legacy." It took another 2 years, but eventually they bought 200 acres from Tucker, good land with water access and grazing for cattle. Caleb built a new house with his own hands, larger than their previous home, with a wide porch and enough bedrooms for everyone. They moved in when Miguel was 8, and he and Rosie immediately claimed the barn loft as their special hideout. The stone ranch started small, just a dozen head of cattle, and the horses Caleb trained. But it grew steadily under Caleb's expert management and Sarah's careful bookkeeping. Samuel left the stables to work with Caleb, and together the brothers-in-law built the ranch into one of the most respected in the territory. Miguel grew into a young man with his father's quiet strength and his mother's intelligence. He went away to study at a teacher's college, then returned to Whiskey Creek to teach at the school where his mother had once helped. Rosie, to no one's surprise, became the first female rancher in the territory, running the horse training operation with skill that rivaled her father's. The twins, Henry and William, were inseparable and worked the cattle operation together with perfect synchronization. Through the years, Sarah and Caleb faced challenges. There were droughts that tested them, years when cattle prices dropped and money was tight. There was the year a wildfire threatened the ranch, and Caleb and Samuel and the boys fought for 3 days to save it. There was the devastating week when Caleb was thrown from a particularly ornery stallion and broke his leg badly, and Sarah had to run everything while nursing him back to health. But through every challenge, they faced it together. Sarah would sit with Caleb on the porch in the evenings, and they would talk through problems, make plans, support each other. Their love never wavered, never diminished. If anything, it grew stronger with each trial overcome. When they had been married for 25 years, the children threw them a surprise anniversary party. The ranch was filled with friends and family, people whose lives Sarah and Caleb had touched over the years. Doc Holloway was there, older now, but still sharp, reminding everyone how he had witnessed the beginning of their love story. Tucker came, retired now, but still full of stories about Caleb's early days at the Double Bar K. Mrs. Rosales was there, gray-haired and smiling, claiming she had known from the first that Sarah and Caleb were meant for each other. During the party, Caleb pulled Sarah aside, leading her to a quiet corner of the porch. From his pocket, he pulled out a small velvet bag. "I have been saving this for tonight," he said. Sarah opened the bag and gasped. Inside was her mother's ring, the one she had nearly traded for medicine all those years ago. But it had been transformed. The band had been cleaned and polished until it gleamed, and Caleb had had it set into a new piece of jewelry, a beautiful locket that opened to reveal tiny photographs of their children. "I wanted you to be able to wear it," Caleb said, "to have it close to your heart, along with pictures of the family we built together. The ring represents where we started, and the pictures show what came from that beginning." Sarah's eyes filled with tears as Caleb fastened the locket around her neck. She touched it gently, feeling the weight of memory and love. "It is perfect," she whispered. "You are perfect." "Not perfect," Caleb said, smiling. "Just a man who loves his wife more than life itself." They kissed, and from inside, the house came the sound of their children and grandchildren, the next generation already starting to arrive, voices raised in laughter and song. This was their legacy, Sarah thought. Not just the ranch or the land, but the love that had started with one act of kindness and grown into something vast and unshakable. As they grew older, Sarah and Caleb gradually handed over the ranch operations to their children. Miguel ran the business side, Rosie managed the horses, and the twins handled the cattle. Samuel's children worked alongside their cousins, and the ranch thrived under the new generation's energy. Caleb's hair turned silver, and lines deepened around Sarah's eyes, but to each other, they remained as beautiful as the day they met. They took to sitting on the porch in the evenings, holding hands and watching the sunset paint the desert in impossible colors. They would talk about the old days, about all the adventures they had shared, about the children and grandchildren who were their greatest joy. "Do you remember that first day?" Sarah asked one evening, "when you walked out of Doc Holloway's office and nearly knocked me over?" "How could I forget?" Caleb said. "You looked so determined, so fierce, standing there with that ring in your hand. I knew right then you were someone special." "You saved us," Sarah said softly. "You saved Samuel's life, and you saved mine too, in a way. I was drowning in fear and desperation, and you threw me a lifeline." "You saved me right back," Caleb said. "I was lost, Sarah, just drifting from place to place with no purpose. You gave me a reason to stay, a reason to build something instead of always running. You gave me everything." On their 40th wedding anniversary, the whole family gathered again. Miguel was there with his wife and 3 children. Rosie had married a veterinarian from Phoenix, and they had 2 sons who were already showing promise as ranchers. The twins had married sisters from a neighboring ranch, and between them had 6 children who ran wild through the property. Samuel and Lucy were grandparents twice over now, their children grown and settled. As Sarah looked around at the enormous family that had sprung from that one desperate day and one cowboy's kindness, she felt overwhelmed with gratitude. Every face she saw, every child laughing and playing, every life represented here existed because Caleb had chosen to help a stranger. That night, after everyone had gone home or gone to bed, Sarah and Caleb lay together in their room, the same room where Miguel had been born, where they had celebrated and mourned and loved for 4 decades. "I would do it all again," Caleb said in the darkness. "Every moment, every choice. It all led here, to you, to this life. I would not change a single thing." "Neither would I," Sarah said. She touched the locket at her throat, feeling her mother's ring inside. "We built something beautiful, did we not?" "We did," Caleb agreed. "We really did." They fell asleep wrapped in each other's arms, as they had every night for 40 years. 2 people who had found each other in the most unlikely of circumstances and created a love story for the ages. The years continued to pass, gentler now, as Sarah and Caleb moved into their twilight. They watched as their grandchildren grew up and started families of their own. The ranch expanded, now covering over 1,000 acres and employing dozens of people. The Stone name became synonymous with quality horses and fair dealing throughout Arizona and beyond. When Caleb was 70, he was thrown from a horse one last time. He survived, but his injuries meant his days of active ranching were over. He took it with grace, content to sit on the porch and advise, to tell stories to the great-grandchildren who climbed on his knee, to hold Sarah's hand and watch the world go by. Sarah, at 68, was still sharp and active, helping teach at the school and managing the ranch's books. But she never strayed far from Caleb, always aware of where he was, always ready to bring him whatever he needed. One evening, as they sat watching the sunset, Caleb suddenly said, "Sarah, I need to tell you something." She looked at him, concerned by his serious tone. "What is it?" "I am not afraid," he said. "Of dying, I mean. When my time comes, I am not afraid, because I know I lived a good life. I loved deeply and was loved in return. I had a family, a purpose, a home. I got to watch my children grow and thrive. I got to spend 53 years with the woman I love. Not many men can say they got everything they ever wanted, but I can. You gave me that, Sarah. You and our family. You gave me everything." Tears streamed down Sarah's face. "Do not talk like that," she said. "You are not going anywhere." "Not today," Caleb agreed, pulling her close. "But someday. And when that day comes, I want you to know I died the happiest man who ever lived." "You made me the happiest woman," Sarah said. "Every single day, you made me happy." They sat together as the sun disappeared and stars emerged, holding each other close, bound by over 5 decades of love and partnership. Caleb lived another 3 years, long enough to see his first great-great-grandchild born, a girl named Sarah Rose. He held her in his arms with tears in his eyes, marveling at the miracle of new life, at how far their family tree had grown. He passed away peacefully in his sleep on a warm summer night, Sarah beside him as she had been for 56 years of marriage. She woke to find him gone, and though her heart shattered, there was peace too. He had lived well and long, had been loved, and had loved in return, and he had died at home, surrounded by family. The funeral was enormous. People came from all over the territory to pay their respects to Caleb Stone, the man who had built a legacy of kindness and integrity. His children spoke, sharing stories that made people laugh and cry. Miguel talked about his father's patience in teaching him to rope. Rosie shared how her father had never once told her she could not do something because she was a girl, had instead taught her everything he knew and encouraged her to surpass him. The twins spoke together as they did everything about their father's wisdom and strength, but it was Samuel who perhaps captured it best. Years old. He paid for medicine when years old. He paid for medicine when we had nothing, and he did it without asking for anything in return. But he did not just save my life that day. He saved my sister's life too, in a different way, by showing her that there was still good in the world, that kindness existed. He became my brother, my mentor, and my best friend. Everything good in my life can be traced back to that one act of compassion. That is who Caleb was, a man who changed lives simply by being good. Sarah sat in the front row, surrounded by her children and grandchildren, and she let herself grieve. But even in her grief, she felt blessed. Not many people got to experience a love like theirs, a partnership so complete and enduring. In the weeks and months that followed, Sarah found her rhythm again. She moved through her days, helping with the ranch, playing with great-grandchildren, teaching the occasional class at the school. But evenings were hard. Sitting on the porch alone, without Caleb's hand in hers, felt wrong. Miguel suggested she move into town, closer to him and his family, but Sarah refused. "This is my home," she said. "Mine and your father's. I am not leaving." 2 years after Caleb's death, Sarah was sitting on the porch one evening when she felt a pain in her chest. She called for Rosie, who was visiting, and Rosie immediately sent for the doctor. But Sarah knew what was happening, and she was not afraid. As her family gathered around her bed, Sarah smiled at them all. "I have had the most wonderful life," she said. "You have all made me so proud. Your father and I, we built something beautiful, and you have carried it forward and made it even better." "We love you, Mama," Miguel said, holding her hand. "I love you too," Sarah said. "All of you, so very much." She paused, her breathing labored. "Tell my story," she said. "Tell your children and their children about how love can start in the most unexpected places, how one act of kindness can change everything, how your father and I found each other and built this family." "We will, Mama," Rosie promised, tears streaming down her face. "We will tell it forever." Sarah closed her eyes, and in her mind she saw Caleb standing in Doc Holloway's doorway, tipping his hat, his gray-green eyes kind. She saw him counting out money, keeping her ring safe. She saw him reading to Samuel, bringing her flowers, proposing by the creek. She saw him holding their babies, building their house, growing old beside her. She saw their whole life together in an instant, and it was perfect. "I am coming, my love," she whispered. And then Sarah Martinez Stone, who had nearly traded her mother's ring for medicine 62 years ago, and instead found the love of her life, took her last breath surrounded by the family that love had created. They buried her beside Caleb, on a hill overlooking the ranch they had built together. The headstone was simple, just their names and dates, and underneath, together they built a legacy of love. The Stone Ranch continued to thrive under the care of their descendants. Miguel's grandson eventually took over operations, then his son after that. The family stayed close, maintaining the tradition of Sunday dinners and holiday gatherings. And they kept their promise to Sarah. The story of how Sarah and Caleb met became family legend, passed down through generations. Children would sit wide-eyed as they heard about the desperate young woman about to trade her mother's ring, and the cowboy who stepped in to help without asking for anything in return. They learned about how that single act of kindness had saved not just one life, but had created an entire family tree. Sarah's mother's ring, preserved in the locket Caleb had made, became a family treasure. Each generation would carefully open it, look at the photographs and the ring, and remember. They would remember that love can start in unexpected places. That kindness matters. That one person choosing to do the right thing can echo through the years, creating ripples that touch countless lives. The ranch flourished into the modern age, adapting and growing, but never forgetting its roots. A photograph hung in the main house, a formal portrait taken on Sarah and Caleb's 50th anniversary. In it, they sat together, their hair silver, but their eyes still bright with love. Caleb's hand covering Sarah's, both of them looking at the camera with the contentment of two people who knew they had lived fully and loved completely. Visitors to the ranch would sometimes ask about the photograph, about the handsome older couple who seemed to radiate happiness. And whoever was asked would smile and say, "That is how this all started, with a woman who loved her brother enough to sacrifice everything, and a man who was kind enough to save her ring and capture her heart. Everything we have, everything we are, comes from their love." And it was true. The sprawling ranch, the multiple generations of family, the reputation for integrity and quality, all of it traced back to one desperate afternoon in 1882, when Caleb Stone walked out of a doctor's office and saw Sarah Martinez standing there with her mother's ring pressed against her palm. It was a love story born of crisis and kindness, of sacrifice and compassion. It was proof that fairy tales could happen in the dusty streets of a frontier town, that Prince Charming could wear dusty boots and a battered hat, that happily ever after was not a fantasy, but something real people could build together through love and commitment and daily choice. Sarah and Caleb's great-great-great-granddaughter, named Sarah Caleb Stone in honor of her ancestors, stood on the porch of the ranch house one evening over 100 years after that first meeting. She was engaged to be married herself, and she wore around her neck the locket containing her great-great-great-grandmother's ring. She touched it gently, thinking about the story she had heard all her life. Tomorrow, she would marry the man she loved, and she would start building her own legacy, her own story to add to the family history. But tonight, she stood where Sarah and Caleb had stood so many times, watching the sun set over the land they had claimed together. "Thank you," she whispered to the evening air, to the memories of the couple who had started it all. "Thank you for showing us what love looks like. Thank you for being brave enough to take a chance on each other. Thank you for building something that lasted." The wind whispered through the cottonwood trees, carrying with it the scent of sage and desert flowers. And if you believed in such things, you might have thought you could hear laughter on that wind, the sound of two people who had loved each other through life and beyond, who had built a legacy that would endure long after they were gone. Their story lived on, passed down through the generations, a reminder that love can bloom in the most unlikely places, that kindness can change the world, and that two people who choose each other every day can build something that lasts forever. Sarah and Caleb were gone, but they were never forgotten. Their love remained, woven into the very fabric of the family and the land, eternal as the desert sky, enduring as the mountains on the horizon. It was a love story that started with a ring and $20, with desperation met by compassion, with a stranger who saw someone in need and chose to help. And it became a love story that spanned decades, created a family, and proved that sometimes the most precious things in life come from the simplest acts of human kindness. It proved that love, real love, the kind that lasts and grows and creates legacies, often begins not with fireworks and grand gestures, but with someone saying, "Let me help you. Keep your ring, I will take care of this." And Sarah had kept her ring, Caleb had kept her heart. And together they had built a life more beautiful than either of them could have imagined that desperate day in Whiskey Creek when their paths first crossed. That was the real treasure, the real legacy. Not the ring, not the ranch, not the money or the land, but the love they had shared and the family that love had created. That was what endured. That was what mattered. That was their happily ever after. And it was real, and it was beautiful, and it was absolutely perfect.